This is the ZMAR Podcast. Elite Benefits of America helps small and mid-sized companies with their health insurance programs. And now, your host, Butch ZMAR.
Another scuba story for you. There's always a story that there's a crane at the bottom of a quarry or a lake. It's probably been 35 years, or even, somewhere around there. I've been scuba diving. Has always been present all over the place, usually by non-divers. They hear this, but some divers usually mysteriously think that there's this crane at the bottom of whatever you're scuba diving, right? Something's drawn to it. There's this idea. It's a mysterious object that's underwater at the bottom of the hole. And so I've searched personally for some of these cranes, or so-called cranes, at the bottom of almost anywhere I've been. Usually, obviously, in oceans, there's a lot of different things, but shipwrecks and whatnot. And there's probably man-made stuff that are inside quarries and lakes. But, usually this is, perceived to be left behind before it flooded. And there's this crane down there. And I'm sure they're out there. I just haven't really found it myself. But there's even been jokes about it. And I played the role as well as for the jokes, like we saw the crane and there was ghosts flying around it, or, maybe we'd make fun of the color of the crane that didn't exist, or the location of it. Just a lot of funs that going through it. And, I always joke that it's always fun until somebody gets a eye poked out, or so the joke goes, right? And I'll get to a story where the joke was on us, but chasing something that wasn't there, even like a treasure chest, right? Some people say, well, if we keep diving, we're eventually going to find the treasure chest. You might find a chest, a box, maybe a CPR mannequin too, right? There's a lot that you could find. You're not going to find gold though, at least not in normal waters. And depending on where you go, there's rules on all that. Like, I know Florida's got a weird rule. If it's within a certain number of miles from the coast, the state owns it. And so, or they share the royalties or something crazy. But anyhow, just be careful of the rules. But so there's this private lake that we were teaching scuba lessons and doing some fun dives in Virginia when I was there. It was a lease that was sold to the local scuba store for their training in scuba diving, right? You could only get in through a passcode, and from our perception on one side, you could only get to the house from a helicopter. We've actually seen the helicopter land and take off. I'm sure there was a road on the other side of the house we couldn't see. It was huge. So he owned this lake, and he allowed us to go scuba diving in it, probably because we were able to aerate the water and maybe keep the fish alive. Who knows? But they let us in there. In this little lake, if you want to call it, this private lake, I've had definitely well over 100 dives, so I've seen quite a bit in this lake, and it was a lot of fun, right? And a lot of places, when you find something to explore, there's local ones in Chicagoland area. There's one in Kankakee. I couldn't tell you how many dives there. Hundreds. I don't think I ever broke 1,000, but just hundreds of dives in this one facility, where it got to the point where I didn't really need compass anymore, or very little, to kind of just point direction. But because of the landmarks, you get to see common grounds, even though it's quite some size. But you could start recognizing some things. But in this one, there wasn't that many things. So there was a training platform. I think there was a rowboat, only one, and there's no motor on it. It just maybe somehow sank. Could have been a hole in it. Maybe some kids goofed off, filled up with water, sank to the bottom, didn't tell parents about it. But that was really about it. There's nothing here, right? And so then we get this story that the crane is somewhere between where we do most of our dives and the halfway point if we were headed back to the house, in the water, that is. And so they claim it was in the deeper part of the water, which was in between. So there was this misconception, right? And so, or at least, everybody believed that it was real. So one day, a buddy of mine said, hey, let's go do this, right? Let's sneak in and let's do this dive and try to find this crane. And we didn't tell the owner that we were going to come to the property. We didn't tell the scuba store. Maybe some friends knew about it. I don't. It didn't gain any popularity. We did get caught, but like no one got in trouble. But it was just more of a laughing matter more than anything. So we snuck in early one morning. It was after sunrise. I just remember in memory because this is going back, got to be 20 years or more. But I just remember it being early, but the sun was up. We set up our gear. We make our plan, try to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And then for some reason, if it does get deeper, what are some protocols that we're going to go through? We also talked about, because it's just the two of us, like what would we do if we lost our buddy underwater because we're not sure of the unknowns. These are all the same common pre-dive planning that you would do with any other dive, even if you're in the Caribbean. We just talked through most of it. We're very experienced, both of us. Unlikely anything would occur, and it didn't occur, but we planned through a whole bunch. And so we start moving, we get to the water, we get in. And then we venture off along the wall and go eventually towards the training platform. So we kind of explore around there because we're here for fun and there's nobody stopping us and we got all day. And so now we start heading off to the middle of this quarry lake, private property, to find this mysterious crane. As we started cruising along, the ground actually started tapering up. So it started getting shallower, not deeper, which I thought was really weird. But so it tells me that the shallow end was closer to the house, and then it was deeper, and that's probably why the scuba divers only dove really on that one side, because there was some more depth to it. Because on some of the training dives, we have to get to 20 feet. I don't know if the middle of that lake was 20 feet. It might have been close. I don't remember offhand. I just know that the other part was deeper, even deeper than 20 feet. It would have been 25 or 30 feet, which in the scuba world isn't a whole lot. It may appear to be deep to some, especially if it's not blue ocean Caribbean water. Because the water filters differently, and so is darker mercury, and just can't see as much. And so some people perceive that it's deeper, but it's not there. But so we keep on growing, and we finally get to more shallower spot, which apparently was the wall tapering back up to the house, the private property, right? And so as we were cruising along, we tried to keep some distance from each other, small. We were still able to see each other. Visibility was fine. It was shallower, so it wasn't dark from light being absorbed by the water, and it wasn't murky necessarily. Sure, it wasn't unlimited visibility, but we kept a little bit of distance so we could see each other in case we needed to interact with our buddy for any given reason. And then we tried to surveillance our side, right? And so we kept looking side to side. And we kept looking, back and forth, we just kept checking with each other to make sure that everybody was okay. Obviously, we were close enough to still signal each other. So as we're swimming along, we probably could see, the span we were looking at between my side and his side, visibility wise, we probably covered over 50 feet across, and we're scanning for this so-called crane. A lot of times when you're scuba diving in water and there's a big object, and it could be anything, right? So it could be like this crane, for example. It could also be when you're in the Caribbean and you're creeping around the corner, you might see shadows of something, and so it might be the coral reef, right? And so big objects do appear in some capacity. So if you look at, like, we're looking for shadows because it is shallow enough and the sun's coming in, we could probably see some dark images in the distance. And so that probably could go another 25 to 50 feet beyond that. So our visibility from one side to the other has got to be over 100 feet. Sure, the lake was larger than that, but we were technically in the center of where it should have been, right, if there is one. So we keep chasing for this so-called crane. We just keep moving along, trying to figure out, all right, where's this thing at? There's got to be here. You hear about it all the time. There's got to be solutions, right? Like just like in the workplace, but we just keep chasing things. We just keep looking around, and we were just as guilty. We're swimming along. And we're trying to cover as much ground as possible, so we're actually swimming a little faster, which is kind of like walking at a fast pace. Eventually, over time, your heart rate increases, your breathing rate goes up, and you're, in this case, we're consuming more air. So, but we get all the way to the other side. We realize we made it all the way through. We adjust over just a little bit, just so that we could cover a little bit more of the surface area, and then we start swimming all the way back. And along the way, we end up finding something quite interesting, right? Imagine finding anything into a private lake or quarry for that matter. But what we ran across was a large extension ladder. And it was a comical joke for a long time where why in the world was an extension ladder in the middle of this lake with nothing else around it? Like, how in the world did it even get there? It's not like there was, I guess there could have been a hurricane because it was on the East Coast, but that's super rare. It's, who knows, the untold stories or, the mysteries, unsolved mysteries, I guess. But so we thought we were smart enough underwater. Hey, we're just going to go ahead and carry this back, right? And so any scuba divers listening to this, you already probably see signs on the wall, right? Like, okay, why are they doing this? They weren't prepared for it. We had no lip bag with us. Which we probably should have anyways. Fast forwarding to this day, most dives I had something, a lip bag with me at all times because we used it mainly as a signaling device. Just proper equipment that you should have. We didn't have it. We're trying to carry this back. We're adjusting our buoyancy. We were already trying to hustle across the lake to try to make difference, and we're just getting exhausted, right? We're just running out of air, and we're like, holy smokes, we're just trying. Who knows how far we were away at this point, because when you carry a heavy object underwater in general, whether you're in tandem such as this, where we're carrying this ladder, or you're carrying a rock. In some cases we had to do, especially when you get low on air in your aluminum tank, sometimes you have to grab a rock because you miscalculated the weight, or you forgot to add it because you were just diving in the Caribbean water and you didn't need that much, or you weren't wearing a wetsuit the last time you were scuba diving and now you are. So there's so many different scenarios that come in. That's part of your pre-dive plan to make sure you have it all. And even though we were in tandem, we're still exhausted, right? We're still moving along. We finally get to the point where we decide, you know what, we just got to drop this. We got to hustle back because we're running out of air. And good thing we did, because I know when we got out of the water and we were kind of joking about everything that just occurred and, just talking through what we saw or didn't see, because we certainly didn't see no crane, that we were definitely below where we should have been coming out of the water with air in the tank, right? They always say when you exit a dive, you should have at least 500 PSI of air in there. We were well below that. We weren't out of air, but just that it just shows how foolish this dive was because of, not proper planning. If we had more tools and resources, we could have done this more efficient, probably doubled or tripled the amount of time we were underwater. But we didn't plan for any of that. And so, a lot of times, just like in business, we end up empty-handed. We get exhausted. We essentially get low on air or become out of air, and we have to abort the dive or abort the mission or abort whatever it is in the workplace. But one thing that we keep holding on to all the time while we're chasing and we're trying to look for this is the benefits program, right? Part of it is because it's a livelihood for some of the employees that are working for you, and you're trying to attract and retain the talent that's already there or bring some new people in. And one of the most attractive offers is health insurance. In a lot of cases, that the employee will stay if you have great benefits, even if you're not paying them more. Not always, but it does occur. That's how attractive a benefit package is. And a lot of times CFOs, owners, HRs, they take this for granted, or they try to shoot for the moon and they always end up missing something, kind of like us missing this so-called crane, right? And so how we approach the benefit program is much like setting out for this mysterious crane at the bottom of the quarry, right? So you're always trying to figure out how to try to find it, and it may never even be there. It's just this, in this case, what you're trying to find this magical solution, but let's just keep doing it the same way we're used to, the way we've been taught for generations. It's the way the industry is teaching employers and CFOs how to purchase their benefit package. and they're not thinking outside the box. In some cases they are, and they're not ready yet for many different reasons. They may be too small. Maybe there's some risk involved, or maybe strategically or logistically or from a bandwidth capacity, they can't do everything all at once. So we go baby steps, but it is a multi-year outlook. You can't just fix it and turn it a dime. These are things that happen and take a while. And obviously the biggest urgency when it comes to the benefit program is the cost, controlling the premium and keeping it under a certain amount. And part of it is because a lot of small businesses out there trying to fight, when I say small, probably under 1,000, most of it under 100, that they're out there sitting there fighting, and they're really not gaining enough ground on the sales side to offset any of the increased costs. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm just saying a lot of times even my own clients, they're flat on revenue for 10 years. They're not increasing, and somehow they're complaining about this 10% increase that they're getting, which has been average for the last 10 years. But their revenue hasn't increased in time by 10%. And there's some unfortunate factors that come in outside of their control. So I'm not trying to pinpoint. I'm just saying that could be a leading cause. But outside of that, we're trying to do things that don't have anything. You have a policy that doesn't have any levers to pull. You have a policy that doesn't have a dashboard with gauges to give you feedback on what's going on with that particular plan. And CFOs out there that are part of these 100, 250, 500, 1,000, 2,500 employee companies, that they're not looking at the data, or they're not looking at it correctly. They don't want to spend enough time. I'm telling you, there was another podcast I did, I broke it down, that you should just get fired for not doing what you're supposed to do. You're a numbers person, and if you're the owner, either figure out the numbers yourself and ask these hard questions to your current broker, or bring your outsourced CPA or CFO that you're already working with and let them do it. I'm telling you, for the cost of paying somebody even as much as $250 an hour or $300 an hour, could save you $1 million a year or $1 million over several years, just for paying somebody $300 an hour to try to analyze some cost. But on most of the plans out there, you could be a 500 employee company and you're still on a plan that doesn't provide you any feedback. Now, supposedly there's some feedback on some of these plans, even the big carriers, but it's not enough, and they don't really disclose everything. So you don't know what true costs are. There's no transparency, very little at least. And so it's hard to build a strategy around something that doesn't give you data. And you should know that, Mr. CFO and owner, because you can't grow your company without data. So what do? We normally, traditionally, go into workplaces. It's taught by the brokers. It's taught by the industry. Well, in order to reduce some of those costs, we're just going to pass on some more premium to the employees. They're just going to have to eat it. There's nothing else I could do, right? And so I'm bleeding. I'm just going to have to do this. And then you have other things you have to worry about. How about their out-of-pocket expenses? Let's raise the deductible. That'll get the premium down. And maybe that year you don't have to increase your employees' costs because the deductible change made enough difference that you were willing to pay the difference at that point. It brought it closer. But now your employees have to pay more out of pocket. And a lot of employees right now can't afford to keep the grocery bill going or putting gas in their the gas tank to go to work. And then you're asking them to pay more at claim time. And it's a selfish move because you're making a decision for yourself or maybe hundreds of employees. And you're just making an assumption, well, maybe because the ones that usually making the decision don't have a problem with their grocery bill. The one that's receiving the benefit decided by somebody else, they're the ones having a problem with the grocery bill. And then, of course, there's just more cost passed on employees. We call this employee disruption. So it's just going to create a lot of havoc in the workplace. The other thing that we do, and their strategies, brokers are been doing this for years. In some ways, you could probably get ahead by switching. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but they have 2 to 3 go-to insurance companies, and every few years they just keep rotating all over again. There's no loyalty and longevity. You're going to have to switch carriers to get better rates. So you have these 2 or 3 core companies that all your employees, if they've been with you for a while, know the cycle, and they just keep rotating. And one of those carriers, some of the employees will be happy with, and most of them won't. And then you switch to another carrier, another set will be happy with the coverage, and the other ones won't. And so there's just this game that goes back and forth, and it really, truly just disrupts the workplace. You're going to have a hard time recruiting people. and keeping people on payroll because they're always looking for another opportunity and maybe somebody else that cares a little bit more about attacking this benefit package so they can give better coverage at a lower cost. So for years, we're conditioned to think this is how we handle benefits, right? I call it the status quo. You'll hear that a lot, especially among brokers that are trying to break out of their own status quo. And we all are, right? I've been in the industry 20 years. I'm still trying to break bad habits for my clients and how do we approach things and look outside the box. And that's one thing about smaller firms. They're more nimble and faster to adapt to current trends of what employers should be doing. Bigger shops are harder to do that, even though they claim they are. A lot of times there's a lot of strings internally. Some of those innovative insurance brokers that work for larger firms, a lot of times they end up leaving and going somewhere else or doing it on their own because they get a lot of friction internally by creating new ideas to help their employer clients out. And when you bring this subject up to bigger agencies, they'll deny it. But they'll claim they're always looking out to the best interest of the employer, and maybe they are, but I just think it's a bigger ship, right? So if a new innovative way to come in to help cut costs, well, there's so much red tape to go through. Some people just give up on it, or it just takes years for them to start implementing it, and the trends are already there, and sometimes even gone by then. And you just cost your employers more money. It's just how brokers have advised for years. The broker doesn't feel comfortable going out and making changes, and a lot of times we find, like in our cases, because we try to promote this innovation and try to promote that, hey, if you get off this platform and move to a plan with levers that you could pull and get data, you have a lot more control of the cost. You could actually reduce and reverse the trend and provide better value and benefits to your employees. And so people are just afraid to make that move. We had one company we were going to save $100,000 a year on, a small company, under 100 employees, $100,000 a year in premium. And their concern was that because we eliminate the provider network, they can go anywhere in the country and they'll never be out of network. They were concerned that they didn't have a network. That was their story. So we moved to a different hybrid plan. Then they end up saving 25% of that cost. So $30,000 is what they end up saving. And so, which is fine. They're still ahead of the curve. But again, they were afraid of not having a network. It's almost like, like all of a sudden you break away a leash from a dog, and the dog decides, I don't know what to do without the leash, right? Obviously the dog takes off, but in this case, a lot of employers would just say, but I don't know what to do. You just gave me all the freedom in the world for my employees, and I don't know what to do next. And so they just get fearful, right? And so so we have to get outside of that mindset, quit chasing for this crane that never existed, which is this magic wand that people look for, that I'm just going to keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different outcomes. Just kind of relate to different stories related to this. It's kind of like when you get a canker sore and you're on your lip and your mouth, and you just keep putting your tongue on there, even though it hurts when you rub it with your tongue, you just keep on doing it. It's like this addictive personality. It's like we're addicted to increases. We're addicted to keep doing their benefit packages the same way. Let's keep increasing costs to our employees and make them mad so they go somewhere else and become profitable for another company. It's just like a lot of other things that we have to deal with in life, right? And so one of it's money, right? And so money and wealth, right? Once we figure out, hey, we got to button up and have a budget and find things that make our money work harder than we do, because all we keep doing is trading our time for money. That's when our wealth really starts to come up, and they start growing, right? Or at least our retirement account starts growing, right? But before that, if you keep doing things the same old way, your habits remain the same, your wealth will never increase, or at least savings for retirement. Even with training runs, right? Running long distances, you cannot train the same with a 5-mile run as you do for a 50-mile run. They're just different, right? And so when it becomes the benefit packages, and if you're trying to do something more long-term, different strategies, control those costs, get access to more data, you're going to have to change. We're just going to have to change the approach with these benefit packages. Well, we're conditioned to think to decrease costs, we have to keep passing on more. We have to change this thinking, because the reality is there's so many programs out there that will reverse the trend of healthcare at the same time actually give better benefits to your employees. And then we have stubborn, egotistic brokers in our industry, as well as employers that just say, I got to keep doing it the same way, right? But it's just like everything else. If you don't budget and change your ways, or if you don't retrain your mind to do something different, such as training for a 5-mile run versus a 50-mile run, you're not going to get the results that you ever dreamed of. And so stop chasing the crane in the middle of the lake that doesn't really exist, right? And sure, you can make jokes at it and plug at it, or even try to go down the rabbit hole, but you might end up with just an extension ladder like we did.